appreciate it. I want to tell you, I told my wife the other day, I said, "Which one's about taller than you?" And I seen you standing over the other. I said, "He's pretty tall." All right. Well, thank you, sir. And this gentleman right here, he was really accepted on. We're with the Society of Professional Journalists, and Mr. Akeem, and he was just a stand-up guy to allow us to come in and for me to be able to work towards my degree. So.
These are your notes here? Okay, so this isn't going to be in your way at all?
What's that?
This isn't going to be in your way?
I don't think so.
Okay, I'm going to move this out of the way.
I will need that to advance the slide.
You can do it here.
How do I do it?
Up and down arrow.
So-
Now this next one. Up.
Okay.
Yep. This gives you more space. It
Okay,
gets
it
really
does.
cluttered
Thank
up here
you. It
because
really
there's
does.
not a lot of space.
There's not, so I could
Yep.
actually put my notebook there if I wanted.
Yeah, you can put your notebook up there, yeah.
That's kind of cool.
Yep.
It's noisy.
That whole trail, that 6 pages worth of detail. So that's what my question was. Let's look up the fossil after we go kind of frame of it.
Akeem, are we ready behind? Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our staff meeting for the 8th day of February, 2022. Today, I understand we're going to learn a little bit about our elections, and I'll turn it over to the manager.
You're spot on, Chairman. That is the only item to talk about today. Our election commissioner is here, and she will get up and give a presentation on the needs and priorities of the election office. So,
Thank you. Morning, Angela.
Good morning. All right, good to see you all this morning. I'll jump right in. So as part of our strategic plan, we decided to take a look at all operations, processes, and resources. And I'm here today to give you my impressions and initial overview of what our most urgent needs are. And I've listed these into order of urgency, not necessarily order of importance. I do believe that all of these are necessary, important, and essential expenditures, but some of them have harder deadlines than others, and so I wanted to start out here. The major areas we're going to cover today are the poll pads, our voting system and equipment upgrades, our poll prints, which are ballot on-demand printers, and we're going to talk about Vote Anywhere, and in doing so, I'm going to talk about some data analysis. So I'll start with the electronic poll books. We acquired our electronic poll books as the result of an RFP in 2017. Our current vendor is No Ink, and our contract goes into 2024. The current hardware we're using is the iPad Air 2, and we now have a need to move up to a newer hardware version. The date for the Air 2 to be out of support with the new iOS is looking like September of 2022, so we would like to move to that new hardware before that support date ends. We would also like to add 158 poll pads for our early vote centers and our supervising judges. This will help us to ensure our reporting is as streamlined and smooth as possible by removing the need to reprogram several devices between use for early voting at the early vote centers and election day voting. And that will allow those devices that we use for early voting to stay intact as they were during the election event through Canvas. And then additionally, we believe this will improve voter experience by putting a poll pad in the hands of each supervising judge at each polling site that they can use for troubleshooting, for looking up addresses if people need to go to the next, to their correct polling site, and just any general voter assistance that we need. So next I'll talk about our voting equipment. There is a new version available of our EVS, our electronic voting system, and we're really excited about the new capabilities. We would like to move to this in preparation for the 2022 statewide elections. Key benefits to this include improved ballot layout. It allows some programming for multiple contests on one screen. So when you go up to the Express Vote ballot marking device, that touchscreen device, and you make your selections, currently it only allows one race per screen. So you make a selection and then you hit next. And then you look at the next contest to make a selection and next. And you go through that for all of the contests and then through that same process as you review the ballot before hitting OK to print and then taking it over to cast it. That will reduce the number of clicks from start to finish if we receive this and can put multiple contests on one screen and reduce the time spent at the booth. Battery replacement is something that we are looking at. The manufacturers recommends that we replace these every 5 years. There are two types here. We are at that 5-year mark, and the first type is the backup batteries. These are backup batteries that we have in our touchscreen devices as well as our on-site precinct tabulators, where you scan the ballot in. That allows us to keep running in the event of a short power outage and is a part of our contingency plan. The clock batteries, those are what I've listed here as the coin cell batteries. Those keep the equipment, the internal time and date programmed. It is typical that every time we open them up to test them for another election that we will reprogram that time and date to make sure it's accurate. But we have experienced that it's losing that time and date between the time we test and the time of election day. And so we're having to talk poll workers through having to try and reset that on site as they're trying to get ready for elections. So we would like to replace those as well. To replace these are done at a preventive maintenance event. So every 2 years, our service contract has our vendor coming out and doing preventive maintenance. And these are replaced at that event. Our preventive maintenance is scheduled for 2022. If we don't do it this year, then it's 2024. We do plan to deploy most, if not all, of our equipment in 2022. So we would like to get these replaced as soon as possible. And in the future, I am looking for ways to plan so that maybe we can replace them in cycles. so they're not all due at once. Ballot on demand printers. These are our poll prints. We need to acquire 55 ballot on demand printers in order to have one at every polling location and one at the election office, and then one for redundancy. Typically, we run 83 polling sites on countywide elections. This reduces the need for unnecessary ballot printing. We only have to print those that we need on election day. Reduces records, storage space, and eventually records destruction by not overprinting ballots that we won't use. And those are the paper ballots that people choose to bubble in. This also does position Sedgwick County for a potential move towards vote anywhere, but we have some challenges. The manufacturer, who was basically the only name in the game for making these printers, at the middle of 2021 decided to stop making these printers. So there was a small amount available, small inventory available, and we cannot acquire those 55 that we need from that. So our vendor is working with manufacturers. They have a plan in place, and they believe they're going to have something produced and ready for purchase by second quarter of this year. When I have a dollar figure attached to this, the dollar figure is based on a quote that I received mid last year, broken out to per poll print, but understandably the cost could change depending on what that device is. The vendor does understand the need to keep the price as consistent as possible, but of course they're looking at their business as well. And the timing of this purchase would be important to meet the timing of testing as we move towards Vote Anywhere. Okay, the Vote Anywhere update. We've reviewed the guidelines and are evaluating the best way to implement Vote Anywhere in Sedgwick County. The earliest this could happen is 2023, and there's a couple reasons for that. First, the guidelines do state that Vote Anywhere cannot be implemented for the first time in a primary or general election in an even year. The other thing is there's a lot of logistics involved, and you'll see that as I go through this. We have to make a plan, and the major facets of the plan include the data gathering and analysis, logistics and resource planning, workforce training, and public outreach. So after we get that information, we can make decisions regarding locations of polling places, levels of equipment and staffing, how to train the workforce on the new rules, and then get that working group together of local officials, county residents, and any others we designate for that public outreach program so we can communicate the changes to the public. As far as data analysis goes, to create a realistic plan, we need some information on how voters prefer to vote in a Vote Anywhere scenario. So we have some data points. Currently, we can look at our current iteration of Vote Anywhere, which is the early vote centers. We can take a look at who is voting at which locations, when they're voting. Is it at lunchtime? Is it after work? On the Thursday and Friday that we have those open. We can also take a look at some election day habits and maybe see if number of provisionals due to wrong polling place occur more frequently at specific locations, such as maybe close to a large employer. But ultimately, in order to prepare and make sure we have the right size of polling location and the right amount of equipment to prepare for voters who will likely show up at the specific locations, we need to gather some information. And we think we need a little help with this. Potentially a survey of voters who typically vote on election day, or just a survey of an amount of voters to see how they would prefer to vote in a Vote Anywhere scenario. We believe we will probably need to engage some outside entity to assist with this. There are entities in the area that could probably help with this, but I don't have a cost on this at this point. Again, this is not necessarily a definitive ask, just looking for an indication that the board is prepared to go in this direction. So for Vote Anywhere timing, We have to be thoughtful, cautious, and deliberate to get this right for our citizens. It's what we want to do, and it's what they expect. Currently, we have a precinct model plan which assigns each registered voter to a specific voting place. Vote Anywhere removes those assignments. So once this is in place, every polling place must be able to accommodate a voter from anywhere in the county and any ballot style. And the project is a joint venture between the Board of County Commissioners and the election office. The plan that's submitted is submitted by us together. It requires my signature. It requires the signature of the chairman. So it really is definitely a partnership. I'll walk you through the timeline backwards. If we were to implement for the primary of 2023, we would need to have our plan submitted by February of 2023. That gives us the 6-month window. In order to submit that plan by February of 2023, we need to be finished probably testing by the end of 2022 and have equipment and polling place agreements in place by the third quarter and probably have our public outreach committee together by the third quarter as well. Again, I say the earliest this could happen is 2023. The election office does have a lot of commitments for 2022. As you know, we have the statewide primary in general. There's redistricting, and then there's always the possibility of special elections as well. Just many logistical concerns. So this is the money piece that I have in front of you. Again, this is not a formal request. The intent of the presentation is to get feedback from you and make sure I'm headed in the right direction. Any requests that we would pursue would occur through the formal process established by Finance and the Board of County Commissioners. If you agree with the needs and direction that we're heading, we would like to order the voting system as soon as possible so that we could have that put in place in March or April, depending on schedule for our vendor. And then the poll pads, the sooner we can get them is better. We do have that deadline for replacement. The information I've provided here for the poll pad cost does include a small buyback amount from our vendor for our old poll pads. As time goes on, that buyback amount may lessen because they become farther out of service. And then, of course, we already talked about poll prints and the timeline for acquiring those in order to test for Vote Anywhere if we were to get that going in 2023. Additional considerations, we're currently evaluating staffing and operations. We're looking at our inventory and supplies in preparation for 2022. There may be additional requests forthcoming, potentially to add some additional FTEs. I'd also like to have a review of the election worker compensation, the hourly rate that people are paid to spend all day at the polling location. But that is what I had to present to you today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the update. I'm a little concerned that Secretary Schwab promised us we'd be able to do Vote Anywhere in 2022. And now we're looking at maybe 2023. It keeps pushing back a year every time we ask. So I'm really disappointed in the fact that we're now pushing back to 2023. In addition, I do have a little bit of concern because you have a 2022 funding request, and we are in the 2022 budget year right now of $1 million, and that's not in our budget for 2022. So we're going to have some really hard decisions to make as we move forward. I agree that making sure that we have accurate voting that the entire community can rely on to be something that we know that it is actually not fake voting, not fraud, not anything else that we keep hearing about in the news, because it is something that we all fight for to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to vote and their vote counts and that it's accurate. So I understand your concerns. We're going to have to take a real hard look at this because, first of all, not being able to vote in 2022 still bothers me a lot. Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple quick questions. So the purchase of these items, this $941,000, does that set us up for the vote anywhere legislation, or is this vote anywhere legislation independent of this purchase?
In order to accomplish vote anywhere, what we would definitely need would be the poll prints.
The ballot printers?
Yes.
The ballot printers. So that one you have to have. But we could live with the current iPads if we had to, if we wanted to.
We believe those will be out of support by September of 2022. It is possible that, that our vendor may be able to continue the current version of the application that we use on the iOS that's available on the iPad 2. But I did some checking with them, and they do believe, I think they said they thought they were going to move. We may be able to get them to continue supporting that through the 2022 general election. But if possible, we would like to move to those newer versions.
It's a curious date, so right smack dab between the primary and the general, they stop their support.
Yeah, it's Apple, when they put out the new iOS version, is my understanding where that date comes from.
Okay, do we have data on our current iPads in terms of their, let me back up. Who is stopping the support? Apple does? Apple's gonna stop support?
So yes, so when the new iOS, when the new system upgrade comes out, we believe in 2022, that upgrade will not be able to be put on the current iPads we have. So
Can we have someone from IT double check that? Because these iPads aren't that old, I don't think. And
we received them in 2017, and I did do some checking in the contract because I was curious as well as to how long the expectation was. They did in the contract indicate that they would expect hardware replacement potentially in 5 to 7 years, and the cost that they gave us for operating the system was a 5-year cost. So I believe that they contemplated hardware replacement between 5 and 7 years.
Okay, well, basically, we're at the 5 years, which is the low end of that window, I guess. But the voting system upgrades, that is software and batteries, right?
Yes. So the reason we have those together, in order to upgrade the software and use the new software, we have to do a replacement of memory on our express vote ballot marking devices. And as long as we have them out there, which they're going to do at the preventive maintenance event, we wanted to do the batteries at the same time.
Okay. The rules and regulations that came out around Senate Bill 130, do we have a copy of that?
Yes.
Do we have it electronically? I've looked for it, I can't find it, so I don't know where the rules and regs are.
It's in a KAR. It is KAR Agency 7, Article 48, Vote Centers. I have copies for you if you'd like to look. They're kind
really
of
great.
tiny.
Yeah, I'd like to get copies of that, that's great. And you talked about doing the data gathering and analysis. Is the intent of that to try to predict, if you will, where people might go if they were not assigned to a poll site, and you want to make sure that they don't have a certain amount of weight, or what's the intent of the data gathering?
That is correct. So part of our plan includes testing, and I could direct you to, I think I have it highlighted here on mine. I could direct you to item F, which indicates our detailed plan needs to provide an estimate of the highest volume of voters at each vote center, and then certify that we've tested to make sure that vote center could accommodate that. We currently have in place polling place agreements for 83 locations, but we need to check and see if those locations would be sufficient. So right now, the locations, the 2 locations, let's say, closest to a large employer such as Spirit, have a certain number of voters assigned to them. Other voters are not likely to go to that because they're not assigned there. If there's no assignment, I need to make sure that I've predicted fairly well the maximum number or the realistic number of voters that may come in at a certain time. So I want to have a space that's big enough to accommodate the correct voters, whether that's 300 between 11 and 1:30 or 3,000 or more. That's the type of information I'm looking for.
Well, I'll just tell you, this is a lot of money and a lot of planning and a lot of discussion and a lot of time given to the problem. We had around, 4,000, I think, provisional ballots where people voted in the wrong poll site. Is that about right number in a presidential election?
Sounds about right.
So in the presidential election, counting, we have county-wide in that election, how many ballots are cast in a presidential election typically?
In the most recent
In Sedgwick
presidential.
County.
Pardon?
In Sedgwick County.
Yeah, in Sedgwick County, in the most recent election, presidential, we had, I don't have the total number of ballots in front of me. We had 70% turnout. So it was quite a lot. And I'm
So
sorry, I
they
don't
say it's
have
a
the total number of
couple
ballots.
hundred, I'm spitballing here, but a couple 100,000 ballots cast in the election, and we have about 4,000 of them were people who had a choice. They were told by the poll site, you have a choice to go to your assigned poll site. And you can do that, or you can vote on a provisional ballot. And by the way, a provisional ballot, we're going to pull out of the box a ballot that is not the correct ballot. And any races that are lined up to your assigned, they're relevant to where you live, they will count. We have to manually count. We have to manually process this because some of the races will count, some of the races won't count. And if they vote on the races that don't count, we can't count those, obviously. So a lot of special handling around these 4,000 people. We're trying to avoid that. We use the word disenfranchisement. We're trying to help them. But bear in mind, they have the option of going to their assigned poll site. They make a choice not to vote in their correct poll site. So again, we're trying to minimize disenfranchisement and try to, our equipment is designed to do this exact type of thing. Our ballot printers, once again, just the ballot printers alone, if you pulled the correct ballot out of the box, if you had the correct ballot, you would use it. Well, the problem is, on election day, they only have ballot styles in the box that are for that poll site, for people who want to vote by traditional paper ballot. So if they're in the wrong poll site, then the correct ballot style is not in the box. Just the ballot printers alone, could you at least print the correct ballot and have them do a provisional on the correct ballot in that case, and not implement fully all of Senate Bill 130? Can we not do that? Because again, having the correct ballot is the key for them to not be disenfranchised. To me, that's the number one thing you have to do is get them the right ballot, which again, you won't have everywhere unless the ballot printers are everywhere. So to me, the ballot printers is a way to not disenfranchise every voter, even if they're in the wrong poll site. They can still vote provisionally, but at least on the correct ballot. That to me is our first step that needs to be implemented, and that's not that much money. Is there any reason why we can't at least do that part? In my opinion, if you don't open up Pandora's box here, I don't know that I think there's a lot of assumptions that people are going to go places they're not assigned to. We don't know for sure what we don't know for sure what they'll do. But all this concern about you're going to have a huge line at one location because people go where they want to go naturally, and not to an assigned poll site, but where they're going to go wherever they want to go. That we have somehow an obligation to create a whole lot more equipment in that one site to make sure the wait times are down. And I think again that's their choice. They don't have to go to that site. They can if they want to, but they don't have to go to that site. I have another question, but let me stop talking for just a second. Let's talk about the ballot printers as a first next step on Senate Bill 130. Can we at least implement that piece of it and not give them the wrong ballot?
I appreciate that concern, and that was a question I had as well. I actually need to consult a little further with the county counselor. My first thought is, hey, this prints it, so problem solved. However, as I look a little more at the laws, the way the laws are written, and I'm not an attorney, but the way the laws are written, they contemplate a partial count, and they talk about delivering ballots for polling places. It's not clear to me whether or not we could deliver ballots that don't belong to polling places to those polling places in a precinct model of voting. I'm just not sure. So I need to do some more checking regarding those laws.
You said the word deliver. I'm talking about a ballot printer at each poll site
And
that
so,
can create that ballot. Go ahead.
correct. And my guess is that, my thought is that if the law doesn't allow us to deliver different ballots, would it allow us to print different ballots? And that's just some guidance that I would need to get before telling you specifically whether or not we could do that.
Okay. I'm about to I guess, jump horses here, because this Senate Bill 130 is a great idea, and I think we're making this, not saying you are doing it, but we're making this so difficult that it's almost like it's not worth the trouble. These people have a choice to vote in their assigned poll site. And that's the first thing I would point out, is that they make a choice not to vote on the correct ballot. We've accommodated them numerous ways. Through early voting, on election day voting, they can go to the correct place, they can do a vote by mail, and in lots of ways they would get the correct ballot, but they choose not to, and they end up in the wrong place. Again, it's a little bit of voter responsibility. They are choosing, essentially, not to have the correct ballot. Now, those high-level races will still work out, and they'll still count. But the lowest races on those ballots may not be correct in that case. But at the end of the day, this is a tremendous amount of difficulty for a problem that 4,000 people are choosing to do that. I understand that with Senate Bill 130, we're not going to assign people to a poll site. Is that correct?
That is correct.
See, that's not what when we testified in favor of this bill, when they passed this bill, that was not contemplated. I think we all contemplated that everyone would still be assigned to a poll site, and if they wanted to go outside the poll site, we could accommodate them if we wanted to. It was permissive. We didn't have to. But if we have the technology in place and we wanted to accommodate that voter at a different poll site, we have the technology or we have the correct ballot, we could accommodate that voter outside their assigned poll site, but they would still be assigned a poll site. And this idea of not assigning poll site, in my opinion, is not what we planned when we passed Senate Bill 130. Also, we talked about potentially on our Sedgwick County app having a page on there where they could actually see the wait times, and supervising judges at different poll sites would be able to call in or somehow provide, if you will, wait times at their poll site. People could look at the app and say, well, the wait time over there is 10 minutes, wait time over there is 2 hours. I'm going to go to the one that's got 10 minutes. But it would be a way for someone to say, I'm going to go someplace where I don't have to wait. And again, that software would help them know where they can go to vote and vote more quickly if that's what they wanted to do. To me, I don't think there's any plan right now to do that app. But I think that was something we talked about a long time ago that I think would make this more usable for the, more convenient for the voter. But anyway. And I have maybe one more question here. When you program so there's 3 parts of voting. There's the check-in on the poll books. There's a ballot marking device if you're voting by electronic machine, if you want to call it that. It's a paper ballot marking device, printer. It marks on that paper ballot, and then that is taken over to the DS200 tabulator where it's scanned, and then that keeps track of the various votes for the various races, and that's what we bring the data back at the end of the vote. At the end of the polling day, that data is brought back to the election central office, whatever.
Correct.
And that's where we get our results initially. And then, of course, there's a lot of validation that happens after that. For that thing in the middle, that ballot marking device, it can have up to 1,000 ballot styles. 0 through 999, if I understand correctly. Up to 1,000 different ballot styles can be programmed into that machine. We don't use that many. We probably use about 300 on a big election, something like that. How do you program that machine for the various ballot styles for each election cycle? Is that done wirelessly, or is that done by some type of a tethered cable? How do you actually program that ballot, the various ballot styles, into that machine? How is that done?
Our programming is done in Election Central through our software and our voting system. Then there are specific, I won't get into too much detail for security, but there are specific encrypted sticks that we use to transfer that program from our system to the ballot marking device. The system knows what stick to accept and what it would not accept. So that's how we get the information from one location to the ballot marking device. Does that answer your question?
Not exactly.
Okay.
I'll just say this: the poll books they have wireless modem in them. They communicate to each other, and ultimately to your office, and then ultimately to the Secretary of State's office, so that we make sure that people who are registered to vote, that when they vote, we keep track of the fact that they just voted, and we know whether we sent them a ballot in the mail, we know whether they've already voted some other location or voted on some other day. We have to keep track of their voting situations so that we don't let them vote twice, especially in a normal process. If they end up voting once by provisional and they voted some other way, we can catch up with that, and we can make sure that only one vote gets counted, for example. So to do that, those polling books, those electronic poll books, where it checks the registration, they are, if you will, wirelessly interconnected somehow, or they're wired to each other, but somehow they're connected to your office, and ultimately, at some point, they are getting data from the Secretary of State's central registration database. Am I right so far?
Yes, they are connected to each other, and they do get data that we put into them that we pull from the Secretary of State's database. They never touch the Secretary of State's database directly.
So throughout the day, I understand they are on the internet somehow. They have a connection to your office. So if someone votes at two places, for example, on the same day, on early voting, we will not let that happen, because they would know they already voted. So
Correct.
they're connected to each other from different poll site to poll site somehow.
Correct.
Okay. The ballot marking devices, do they have anything that's a wireless modem? Are you connected to them in any way, even during programming? Are you programming those machines in some way wirelessly?
No,
It's never done wirelessly.
that is correct.
Okay, that's an important detail, because I'm getting a lot of questions about that. And then finally, the DS200 tabulars, you and I already talked about that. There are some versions out there in the country that have wireless modems. I don't know why, but our machines do not have wireless modems, and you have verified that, correct?
That is correct. There are a couple of states that do allow election night reporting directly from the tabulators, and I think that's why that's an option on some of them. I have verified with our vendor that there are no modems in our machines. Number one, it would be an extra charge. So they don't just put modems in there. You'd have to request it and then pay for it and then pay for the installation. Number two, I've opened up the machines and I've seen where the modems would go. There is no modem there.
Okay. I may have more questions about that another day, perhaps, but I think that's all my questions for now. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Meitzner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Commissioner Howell covered most of my questions. Thank you. Angela, this is a really good summary report. I just remember when you were or all the interviews on replacing the election commissioner, there was a consistent thought among most of us that the election office maybe needed to have some support and some more reevaluation. And I don't think any of us knew exactly what it was, but it is a little bit pricey, but at least it appears to be a pretty thorough evaluation of what you think is what's your needs and wants and prioritize. So I just wanted to comment to say thank you that you're kind of following up on what we when you were hired. I think most of us told you that we know there's some problems that we need to help solve financially or with equipment. So thanks for this report. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Commissioner Howell?
Just another thought. Thank you, Chairman, for a second bite at the apple here. If we don't pay for these things because the Secretary of State has set it up, we have to do this in an odd year. It puts us at 2 more years to 2025, correct?
23.
Well, we're already in 2023. That's the first year we can do this. If we don't buy this equipment this year in 2022, we will not do vote anywhere policy until 2025, being an odd year. So you can't do it in 24, and you can't do it in 22. And the only way you can do 23 is if you buy this stuff before February, and it's going to take time to get it here. So you've got to buy it in 22 to get it here for his requirements in February of 23, which sets us up for a 2023 use of this vote anywhere legislation. If you don't buy this stuff in 22, this year, current budget cycle, we won't touch this again until 2025.
If I could respond to that for just a moment, I think that the way you're looking at that is accurate. However, the asterisk on that is that if in 2024 we were prepared and there were a special election, by looking at the at the guidelines, and I would defer to the county counselor, but by looking at the guidelines, it does appear that we may be able to implement in a special election. It just indicates that it cannot be used for the first time in a primary or general election in an even year. And again, I would defer to the county counselor if I'm reading that correctly.
Commissioner Howell, Mike Papoon, County Councilor. Kevin Stamper in our office is going to be looking at this and working with the election commissioner. We can certainly get you an answer on that. At this point, I'd hate to speculate on that.
Share one pointer. I'll just share this. You know, we testified in favor of this legislation, I think, a couple of times before it passed. It's hanging on the wall over there. I think that's the bill. I think that's what we reframed up. But when they did a rules and regulations hearing, I was the only one that testified. No one, no county clerk, no county election commissioner, nobody. There was no opponents. There was no proponents besides myself, and I'm the only one that actually had suggested a number of changes here, and they didn't take a single thing I said. As far as I can tell, my ideas that I shared that day, none of them got into this rules and regulations. So the theory we had when we started this process is not it's not where we ended up. So to me, where we are today, the complexity that they've created around this, in my opinion, I've kind of lost interest in the whole thing personally. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lopez?
Thank you, Chairman. So just remind me if I'm correct, and Tom, this might be a question for you. We have a $300,000 contingency, and this is about $941,000 total ask. Are we able to, what does this even look like if we wanted to go down this path? Do we have the financial means to do so?
Let me do two things, Vice Chair. Let me have Lindsay come to the podium and address that, what the options are for the commission if they want to consider this. And we've had Greg Gann call in to talk about the history of the iPads. And while Angela's here, I would like Greg to get a shot after Lindsay has done this to address Commissioner Howell's question on the iPad histories. So Greg is on the phone to do that.
Thank you.
Lindsay, go ahead.
Okay. So, good morning, Commissioners. There is a $300,000 earmark in the contingency. The types of purchases that are being discussed today are an acceptable use of fund balance per our policy. And so we would have other budget authority available in contingencies to fund this. We did have, as you saw, sales tax receipts that were significantly more than expected last year. And we still have the continued benefit of the CARES personnel reimbursement that occurred. So if you recall during budget discussions last year, we talked about use of fund balance is okay for non-recurring expenses. So this would be an appropriate use for that. And if this is something the commission would like to do, I think we're in a position financially to sustain it in order to get to your vote anywhere. I would rather do it this year than have it compete for some of the other priorities you've already voiced for the 2023 budget, behavioral health, compensation, and things like that. So if the goal is to do vote anywhere, I think it makes sense for the commission to consider this and use fund balance to support it. Any questions I can answer? Okay.
I guess I have a question for Angela. Out of this 941,000 plus whatever we have for the data, if we just decide to forget Senate Bill 130, because I don't know if it's ever going to happen, can we eliminate all these?
If we decide to forget Senate Bill 130, I think that the poll prints are not an essential purchase at this time. We still would need to replace the 400 iPads that we have. Again, we would like to add the 158. So the replacement is necessary. The addition of 158 is a request. And then we would like to upgrade the software. We think that's a necessary, and there's a portion of that.
But that software, all it does is make it more convenient on the page. It doesn't affect the ability of, if I go over across the street and vote.
That's correct.
It just means
Yeah.
I got to push a couple more buttons.
Correct. That does not affect vote anywhere.
So, no, it doesn't affect voting, actually.
Correct.
I can stand there a couple seconds and push a couple more buttons and save $400 or $345,000 possibly.
That is an accurate statement. There are some additional benefits to the software. It does improve our programming. It does upgrade our operating system, replaces our server and some of the hardware. Technology is always changing, and we do, especially where voting is concerned, we do want to be on the front of it rather than trying to catch up. But I believe your comments are correct. Not changing the voting system would not affect voting. You are correct.
And $176,000 for on-demand printers, if we're not worrying about somebody coming into the wrong precinct, I don't really need an on-demand printer. We can just have ballots laying there for that precinct, correct?
That is correct.
Well, I guess your briefing today kind of discouraged me more than it encouraged me. Let me see if we can bring up IT and see what we know about these iPads, see if there's any way that we can start bringing those in a few a year rather than all at once.
Greg, are you on the phone?
I am.
All right, go ahead. Did your Commissioner, or Chairman Dennis's question?
I did. Thank you, sir. Greg Gann, IT, I'm the Business Solutions Group Director. The Apple iPad 2 had a lifespan from 2011 to 2014. They discontinued that on March 18th of 2014. In 2016, as Apple released iOS 10, they dropped support for the iPad 2 because of hardware and performance issues. Current iPads run on iOS 15, 5 generations newer. They no longer supply security updates for the iPad. All the updates that they're making from Apple apply to iOS 10 or better. The iPad 2, in my opinion, has reached end of useful service and should be replaced. The modern current level of iPads, pardon me, available have a very long lifespan and are incredibly reliable.
Okay, well, I don't know why we didn't, we've got this technology review committee that takes a look at these things, and we've got a separate line item for technology review. I don't know why we haven't been talking about this back when we were doing the budget for 2022. Why didn't the technology review committee come pick this up?
Greg, do you have an answer for that, or is that?
I do. Thank you. My understanding is that it was, we knew that it was being prepared, but it had not yet been presented to us. Our advice would have been to replace the iPads.
Okay.
And I think that was part of the transition from one commissioner to another.
Very good. Commissioner Cruz?
Thank you, Chairman. That was my question. So what else are we missing, I guess, would be my question. I don't want to have other departments come up here and say, well, we missed this in our technology when we have a board that's designed to handle that. So I'm a little disappointed as well. That's the same question I had with Chairman Dennis. So if these new iPads are purchased, what's going to be the plan so that another commission isn't faced with this in subsequent years?
I think what we're looking at is the iPad 9th generation. I believe we would want to work with technology review to kind of decide how long that useful life is. There's some different things going on as far as replacement of poll pads in the future. There is some legislation currently being proposed that contemplates certification for devices. If that is passed, then there may be some additional considerations once those systems are certified by the Secretary of State's office. But I would hope that there would be a way to establish some type of fund where we could plan for these replacements. In my conversations with the vendor, I asked them the question, hey, when did we find out? And what the representative told me was that they were all surprised that the Air 2 was being supported through the end of 2021 and past the end of 2021, and that when they found out for sure when it would not be supported, They held a conference call and sent an email the next day, and that was in February of 2021.
So has this gone through an RFP? Are these the only things that we can purchase? I mean, these iPads are the only things that we can use? Is this the only option we have?
iPads are the operating system for our pull pad vendor. We do have a contract through September of 2024 with our vendor. I have checked pricing between our vendor and Apple Business Solutions, so Apple Direct. The better pricing, it's pretty close in pricing. The better pricing is a little bit, no ink by a little bit because of the buyback. It's just a little less altogether. But yes, the pull pad software does operate on iOS. In fact, I did some checking into the RFP because I was curious as to why iPad was chosen. And in the RFP, actually one of the line items they indicated was that the iOS platform was preferable on any responses.
Okay, well, thank you for this information today. I would ask, though, what other technologies, when will the next time the Technology Review Board meets?
So the Technology Review Board focuses on software and department-run operations that touch the county network. This component does not touch the county network, which is part of the issue of why TRB did not address this, in addition to some miscommunication between the old commissioner and the new commissioner of elections. The TRB meets monthly. How often do we meet? So, I mean, we could bring this back up and we can discuss it the Technology Review Board can discuss it as a group.
Could we expand their reach to anything that the county has to pay for?
We would have to maybe redirect the policy a bit on how that board works.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Chairman. Just had a chance to read through the rules and regulations, a couple more questions. On Election Day, the election office does not do a public voting on that day, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. When we testified on this, I feel like we've had to make the case that every poll site would be a vote center. That's the word they use. Every poll site in Sedgwick County would be able to accommodate any voter for any ballot style. And that was kind of our goal, because I think our system is designed to do that inherently, whether we use it that way or not. For some reason, there was a lot of misunderstanding around that idea. And initially, when they were talking about Senate Bill 130, they were talking about mega vote centers, if you will. Imagine, if you will, Town West Square or the Extension Office or the Intrust Bank Arena being a mega vote center where there's a huge amount of parking, and it's a large space, and we would have, a very large number of people and equipment inside to handle a large group of people. And so we would essentially have a few places around the county that would be a mega vote center that would actually have the provisions of Senate Bill 130, but every other poll site would still be a regular poll site. Is that something worth pursuing at all, or is that something that actually complicates things?
That's a good question. I'd have to think about that a little bit. I think that currently we have our early vote centers, which do act as basically a vote anywhere, but only before elections. So your question is, if we were to try to redirect something that allowed us to do a large vote center or a large vote anywhere and then maintain the other, would that be doable?
I guess the split the baby idea here, maybe so that every poll site's not the vote center. We would have some locations that would be, maybe some of those advanced sites that are larger would be reasonable places to say that they would continue doing what they were doing before Election Day. I mean, just another idea there. But anyway, the thought we battled in Topeka when we discussed this bill initially was there was a lot of understanding by other people that we were advocating for like a Town West Square solution or a Town East Square solution. You'd have some huge area that an open space. Intrust Bank Arena would be another great example, where there's lots and lots of parking nearby, and we would just simply we would do the vote center theory and just a couple spots around the county. And the idea would be there would be no line. They could walk in, be assured they could walk in, vote quickly and walk out. So, going back to I think the 2008 election, I believe I stood in line for more than a couple of hours, and nobody wants that to happen. But if someone can say, well, I know that the line here is going to be 2 hours long, but I could drive 20 minutes and get to a vote center, and I could walk in and vote quickly and walk back out. Maybe that's what they would do. But you don't need to have 86 of these places. You just need a few. So split the baby idea. Maybe we should be talking about doing a couple of these spots here. I'd like to also point out, by reading these rules and regulations, do we currently submit a current election day plan to the Secretary of State?
I have not submitted an election day plan to the Secretary of State.
Because this makes the point that if we switch over to a vote center strategy and we decide to go back to it's called a precinct model of voting, that we have to submit a plan to have that approved by the Secretary of State. So if we go to that direction, then come back to where we are today, that has to be, a full plan has to be submitted to the Secretary of State, it has to be approved by him for us to make that change. And by the way, going in that direction or even coming back to the place we are now, correct me if I'm wrong, but every election cycle, we add a couple of poll places almost every election cycle. Add a couple here, close a couple there. It's a thing that changes all of it. It's dynamic. And this talks about a 4-year plan. I don't think you can assume that our poll sites are going to be in place for 4 years. And if you want to add poll sites, it's not clear how you report those changes if it requires a total resubmission to the Secretary of State. But let's just talk about this. It talks about how many parking places are there, how many tables and chairs do you have, and on it goes. It's just, to me, if we're not doing this currently with our current, again, dynamically, we're changing with, each election, we change a little bit. And we're not doing this already. Again, this is adding rules and regulations that may not even actually be for a vote center situation. I think there's actually new rules and regulations we might have to comply with already under the precinct model of voting. In other words, we have to submit a plan, it sounds like, to the Secretary of State, telling them how many chairs we have at a poll site, according to this. So
I can tell you, Commissioner, that we do have that information. When we go and do our poll site studies, we study the parking lot, we check the grade to make sure it's ADA compliant. If there are not the adequate number of parking spaces that are ADA compliant, we have tools that we use to add those. We list out the number of tables and chairs that we will have, the number of voting machines, depending on whether it's a larger election or a smaller election. So we have all of that information. I'm not sure how often that has been submitted or is required to be submitted, so that's a great question. I will look into that.
it looks like if you make changes, it looks like you have no less than 90 days prior to the election to submit those changes, and at a minimum every 4 years. So thank you, rules and regulations. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, thank you. Well, just a couple final comments. First of all, when we started advocating for Senate Bill 130, it has morphed into something that is beyond any of our thoughts at the time we were trying to get this to happen. When we brought the governor into this very room and she signed Senate Bill 130 right here, it is now morphed into something that we never imagined at that point in time. So I'm very disappointed. I don't know why that we couldn't just say, hey, we're going to implement super vote centers in the early election and just forget all this stuff. We just have, you've got 10 or 12 different locations that you can vote early. Let's just put the super vote centers at that point and forget this whole thing. So that's one of my disappointments, is where we're at today. The second thing that I'm kind of disappointed in is what I just learned, is that when I first got here, I had a background in IT, and I was very disappointed in our budget process, where the IT functions were spread across all these different departments, and they all ended up in different budgets, and we had no idea what we were spending for technology. And we formed this TRB to gather that all together, and now today I find out that the TRB hasn't gathered all this together, that we still have individual departments or agencies that are operating separately and trying to put it in their own budget. So I hope that in 2023, as we're developing our budget, that our TRB manages our IT functions so that we don't get surprised like this. So I'm going to task the staff to bring all of our IT under the TRB so that we don't run into surprises. Anyway, where I'm at right now, I'm not too excited with funding all of this out of the 2022 budget. I think there's things that we can cut out and get this down to a reasonable value. I'm ready to forget Senate Bill 130. It was a great idea that's developed into something that is just turned into a nightmare. So that's where I'm coming from right now. Any other questions? Commissioner Howell?
It's not so much a question, but I would like to have a chance to talk about County Day at the Capitol, and I have one announcement on some legislation before we dismiss today.
Very good. Well, that was my next thing, was talk about County Day at the Capitol. So,
I just want to make sure you get dismissed, that's all.
is there anything else to talk about with the election office? Well, we appreciate you coming over. I hope we weren't too hard on you, honestly. That was not my intent. It's just, I'm very disappointed in where we're at and where we're going in the future.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman, and my first call will be over to IT. I will set up an appointment, and we can do a thorough review.
Sounds great. I appreciate it. Thank you. Well, Mr. Manager, we each have a little piece of paper on our desk right now talking about the County Day at the Capitol coming up next Wednesday, February the 16th, and it has some items on here about a table display. I need to know if we're going to do that. If we are, who's going to man it? What kind of displays are we going to have out? What are your plans for?
Well, I didn't have that paper on my desk, sir, but I'm hoping Tony did.
Do you need to borrow my copy?
I don't know if we have any data on that, so yeah, I'll take a copy and we'll react to what we read on that paper.
Okay, well, I guess we need to know, it starts at 8 o'clock in the morning on 16th, and it runs till 3 p.m. It talks about a table display. It talks about we can have power available for our table display. Talks about where we can come in to bring the government attendees in, loading and unloading, parking, snacks and so forth. So it brings up a lot of questions, but there is not a single answer on this thing to any of those questions.
Well, Chairman, we'll read it and we'll get answers to it. I'm just seeing it for the first time. So.
Sounds good. Well, I think most all of us are going to be up there, and it's going to be early, 8 o'clock in the morning, so I need to make sure that we're comfortable as we come rolling in at some point that morning. Commissioner Howell?
Just a couple, yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of points. Do we know what day turnaround is this year? I wish I knew the date. I see Tanya's.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Tanya Cole. Lindsay just informed me that it's February 22nd.
Okay, so that's the end of a week. So this will probably be right before they stop doing committee work, basically. The time, and just say this is the first year I believe the KAC's done this. I'm not aware of this before.
That's correct. This is an inaugural event.
So their timing's a little off to me because, and by the way, I've asked our staff. They told me that there's a lot of organizations like the County Clerks Association and the County Sheriff's. They all have tables as an association that represents the entire state. And there's like 5 or 6 counties that actually have a table. But this is not about county commission necessarily. This is about Sedgwick County, which is a lot bigger than just the commission here. So I think if we're going to have a table for Sedgwick County, it needs to incorporate, our legislative platform, and it has to have people there that can speak about all kinds of things related to the county, not just a county commissioner. It's not a county commissioner table, is what I'm trying to say here. I do think we ought to have a table, but I don't know that commissioners ought to be at that table necessarily because I've seen how this works. They put a table in the rotunda, and you'll see a legislator walk by. There's going to be, dozens of tables out there in the rotunda and up and down the halls. and you might talk to a legislator here and there. I tell you, your opportunity to engage a legislator is pretty limited at these tables. But commissioners can talk to legislators throughout the Capitol, in their offices and all over the place. And so, to me, if I stand there at this table, I might have 2 or 3 conversations in an entire day. But if I am in the Capitol and I'm roaming and looking for legislators to speak with, I can probably talk to dozens, quite a few legislators about our platform. And so, to me, if I'm going to be there, I want to be free to roam and to lobby our ideas wherever I happen to go in the Capitol. So I'm okay going. I do think we got to have a table, but I don't think I want to stand there at the table. Does that make sense? And the timing of this is off. If they want to do this again next year, they need to do it earlier in the legislative session. This is a little bit late. Having said that, I guess I would like to go. I'm not sure who else was going to go. I think we need to be clear who's going.
Well, we probably ought to, since we're all here, I plan on going.
I do not plan on going. I'll be in DC.
I was planning on going, but I would agree. I don't think a table would be adequate. I mean, there might be 105 tables if every county had a table. So I think we just work on our own when we're up there.
Do you want to have a county table and just have our county staff there basically to represent the county, and you and I are lobbying our platform?
If you, do you think it's, you've been up there, do you think it's valuable? Do you go by tables and look at all the
to me, it's weird not having a table. I mean, part of me says it's almost expected that we would have one, but Joco doesn't have a table, by the way, at least not yet. So if the other large counties aren't going to have tables, then I guess I'd like to do what they do, but part of me says, I think in a small way, it's kind of expected you would have a table there, but is it very effective? No, it's almost a waste of our time. I mean, being in the Capitol and lobbying our issues is very valuable, and it's important to be there and do that. But the table itself is not the way to get that done. So it's just, whether you want to just do what's expected or not, to me, I'm indifferent a little bit. So whatever you want.
I'm in favor of not putting the pressure, this timing squeeze, not putting pressure on staff and supplies and all that. But respect whatever you think.
Well, I'll be there, but I don't think we need a table then.
I'm fine with that. And Mr. Manager, if you can coordinate with the 3 commissioners that are going so that we can figure out how we're going to get there, what time we're going to get there, and what kind of schedule we can put together.
Okay, we can do it.
Hey, what else do you have to come before the board?
That was it?
I have one.
Tanya?
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Howell.
I just wanted to share, is Lindsay still in the room? I wanted to share with you and see if you're excited about this or not. We have your legislation that we asked for that's on our platform has now been introduced into the system. And it's it'll be an exempt bill because it went to Fed and State this morning. And I believe by talking to some people, I think it's going to move. So I'm excited to let you know your bill's it will be in bill form. You'll be able to look it up online this afternoon. I have an RS number, but you don't need that. We'll get you a bill number this afternoon. All right? Thank you.
Thank you. Tanya, do you have something else?
I do. Can I make a correction? Turnaround day is February 24th, not the 22nd. Okay.
Very good. Anything else from the commissioners? Anything else from the manager?
That's it, sir.
Sounds good. Well, let's adjourn. Thank you all.